Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Clear Your Path to New Beginnings with me, your host, Tori Sachs. And today we're in retrograde season, guys. So today we're actually gonna go a little bit backwards. I was not in the space to start recording for July, and so we're doing this towards the end of July, but still helpful, and I still think it'll be good to go back to and look at. So without further ado, these are the July transits for you. So just like overview on them. I guess really I'll just go like step by step and then I'll go back and explain them to you a little bit. So we had on July 4th Neptune stationing retrograde. Actually, let's be clear. We've had, well, right now we have four planets retrograde, but we had in this month of July, we've had three planets station retrograde. So that's a lot. So like I said, July 4th, we had Neptune station retrograde. On July 10th, we had the full moon, that potent full moon. On July 12th, we had Saturn turning retrograde. And then on July 17th, we had Mercury turning retrograde. And then on July 20th, really up until today, the 22nd, we've had Mars and K2, Mars and the south node of the moon that we also call K2 have been conjunct. And they'll continue to be conjunct until the 28th, but they've been in this really exact conjunction, fiery conjunction, this 20th through the 22nd. And then we round the month out with the new moon on the 24th. So that's just like high level overview. And this month has been a lot. Not only because we've had three retrogrades, also we've had this Mars K2 energy, but also because, at least at the time when I'm recording this, we are about 6 to 7 weeks away from eclipse season. So, we're actually every day we're moving forward to eclipse season, which starts around September 6th and 7th and goes about to the 21st, 22nd. Some people will even say that it goes all the way through to the next time that we have a new moon or a full moon from like when the portal actually closes. But we'll get much more into that in like August and September. Don't you worry. I just kind of like to put that on your radar to prepare yourself for things that are coming up. So overall, we're in retrograde season. Like this month has been having us go and reflect and internal. It's really an interesting time because we had the dichotomy of last month of entering summer, and summer is a time to be fully present and in our greatest expression, our greatest active masculine expression. And then this month it's like, hey girl, I need you to go back internal and really think about things and go back and see how this thing that you thought about, or maybe the situation that occurred, or choices you made earlier in the year, maybe they didn't go the way you wanted to, or maybe you want to make some changes. So it's really interesting because it has some of this yin energy when we're in a very yang time, very masculine yang time. So you would think like the month is actually asking us to be a little bit more like the season of winter. So there's like really interesting dichotomy. So let's talk about things. So July 4th, we had Neptune station retrograde. So Neptune is the planet that brings he brings a little bit of confusion. He can also bring clarity. You know, it's like a mixed bag with Neptune. Neptune, also we talk about rose-colored glasses, not seeing things fully. So that clarity that we're talking about, and this happened if you're watching and you are a part of the United States, this happened around the 4th of July. So really interesting time. Like here in Texas, it was a really hard time because of what was going on in the hill country and just all of the grief that was happening. And this honestly happened right around the station. And Neptune is also known for ruling water and liquids. So the fact that it stationed retrograde in the sign, and this is like I'm a sidereal Vedic astrologer using Jyotish, which is the eyes of the Vedas, but this happened in a sign of Pisces, which is also the ocean and water. So we saw that play out here in Texas. And it brought a lot of confusion and heaviness, right? With with Neptune stationing retrograde. We all felt it. And so, and honestly, that's been part of the reason why it was like, do I talk about this? I hadn't recorded the transits, but I think, it's always good to be aware and kind of see things and understand patterns and understand the energetics of the cosmos. Um, so that was the stationing of a Neptune, and we'll get Neptune in his retrograde moving back. He stays in a sign for about 14 to 15 years. So he's been here for a few years now, and he will station direct in December. So we won't really talk about him again until December, but that's just kind of like the energetics that we're working with Neptune is that you might notice, okay, like all of a sudden around this time I'm getting so much more clarity, or around this time, maybe it brought in more confusion, or maybe a little bit of both, right? So again, retrogrades asking us to go internal, these RE words. So then on the 10th, we had the full moon, and this was happening in Sagittarius in the sign called the first victory in Purva Ashada in Sagittarius in that area, that nakshatra, the lunar mansion. And so, again, when this happens, it's because the moon and the sun are exactly opposite. And this is the brightest expression of the moon. So, this was a great time to put your crystals out. And it's, thinking about as we get closer to eclipse season, we had the full moon, and then we will have another full moon in August. And that's honestly going to be the last time I'm going to recommend until we are post eclipse season. So back into really October when you can put your crystals out. And I'll talk about that more now, later, sorry, but so putting our crystals out is really a great way to charge them and get the energetics of the moon. So again, this is a great time to do that. Be out in the moon, getting the energetics of that maternal mother feminine energy, that yin energy. So we had that on July 10th. And then on the 12th, so 2 days later, we had Saturn turn retrograde. And so he's going to be retrograde until about the end of November. I think it's like the 26th, 27th, depending on where you are around this planet. But Saturn, um, rules structure. So he rules a lot of things, right? He rules structure, he rules our bones, he rules our joints. Sometimes, depending on what lineage of astrology you're looking at, he also rules the teeth. Sometimes we look at Mars as ruling the teeth. He is also the planet of grief. He is the planet of karma, duties. He loves consistency. He loves hard work. He's also seen as your career in the chart. He can be like a career placement. And depending on where Saturn lives in your natal chart and what houses he rules, that's also going to be impactful and where he's currently transiting right now, right? So the biggest thing I want you to take away from this is that Saturn, when he's normally going forward, looking straight ahead, that he is in charge of structure. And so now when he's retrograde, or remember those RE words or RE terms in front of a word, he is now going backwards. He's going retrograde. So instead of us thinking about structure, I want you to think about restructuring. And why this is important is that maybe I love analogies. So in metaphors. So maybe you had a house and the foundation was not correct, was not actually holding the way that it needed to in the house. And so what Saturn is asking you to do is be like, okay, this house is not working so well. We need to restructure the foundation. Or maybe it is like another example. It's another area, right? Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's, thinking about ourselves. Like, depending on where Saturn is transiting, like if he's transiting in the first house, you're really going to feel it in the head. And so if he is transiting in that area of the zodiac for you, it could be tied to your thoughts, right? Like our head, a lot of thoughts live there. So maybe you need to say no to certain thoughts and certain narratives and ideas that have really been the forefront for you, but are no longer serving you. So this could be a beautiful time where Saturn's like, hey, that thought that you've had that is not serving you, I'm going to help you restructure in the sense that we're just going to move that away. So it's no longer, we're just going to get rid of that thought. And so that would be a restructuring, right? Because now you're like, I'm viewing things differently, my beliefs are differently, and it's a beautiful way that Saturn is helping you in this moment. So, like I said, Saturn rules a lot, but what I want you to think about is how am I restructuring parts and pieces of my life during from this July 12th to basically the end of November. So, just thinking about where am I restructuring? And you might not necessarily know, but all of a sudden you might realize, oh, there's like a pattern where I'm only really working on restructuring in my career. Or I'm really only focused on my business, or I'm only focused on restructuring how I look at my health. And so that's going to give you a little bit more of an indicator, even if you don't know where Saturn is and where he's transiting for you. The other thing to note is that Saturn walks, we talk about the myth that Saturn walks with a limp. So that's why it feels like it could be a really long time, right? He hangs out in a sign for about 2.5 years, and he just entered sidereal Pisces at the end of March. So he's just like kind of been getting settled into um, into Pisces, and now he's starting to go backwards and look at Aquarius. So you might notice also, okay, like maybe I'm getting more and focus on like humanitarian efforts in certain areas of my life, where before it was like more mythical and maybe I was in the vast ocean. And so again, that could also give you some indications. Then just a few days later, actually, like we just experienced this within the last week, we had our friend Mercury turn retrograde. And again, you know what? I'm like embracing this. Like, think about this. There's always something happening. We've been through a lot of these things before. This is not the time to get all freaked out and crazy about what's going on because that wouldn't help our mental state, right? And Mercury does rule the mental body, and we all have a Mercury in our chart. All these things I'm talking about, we all have in our chart, even animals. Even if you did a chart for your business would have a Mercury, right? Intelligence. So Mercury is the color green, the mental mind. Mercury is also communication, technology. We associate Mercury with banking, and could also associate Mercury with financial institutions and he rolls the hands traditionally and gestures. Um, so all these different things that Mercury rolls. And I can tell you just from some things that I've encountered, we have had to really kind of um, be a little bit slower about our decision making. We've had to maybe instead of saying, hey, yes, I will sign on the dotted line, you know what, maybe I need to think about that. And maybe you just need to think about that for a couple of days, or maybe you want to take a couple weeks or months, right? But this is a time to again go internal, reflect, and see what you really need in this moment. Um, he also rules contracts. So um, maybe if you can hold off, maybe it's not the time for you to enter into a contract. But again, if it feels right and you're like, I need to do this, then do this now. We still have to live life. So Mercury also rules sales and marketing as well. Um, so we might feel during this time that there's lack of clarity in our communication. We talk about miscommunication all the time. We talk about how um, that our decision making isn't clear. So just all things you want to be aware of. I'm also using this in a really purposeful time where there's certain things like this video, for example, that I wanted to get to weeks ago that I didn't, and so I'm doing it now. There's also classes during retrograde season that I wanted to get to months ago, but I didn't have the time or the space. And so now the universe has made me slow down and given me this opportunity to go back and reflect. So, in a weird way, my new kind of mantra is that sometimes we have to go back to move forward. And so sometimes we have to look back or go back to things that there's this phrase in Spanish that we basically say that we're putting it on the margin or we're putting it to the side. And so now we're bringing it back to the forefront so that we could really move through it in a purposeful way. Ways that you could work with this energy, like remedies for this, like super easy remedies would be wearing green, because green is associated with Mercury and it actually helps calm Mercury. Green is also associated with Archangel Raphael and his healing abilities, the healing green ray. And so you can work with the color green. You can also work with the color blue. That is really healing for the mental body and calming the mental energy. And the throat chakra, for example, you can also work with the color purple too. It helps harmonize both the masculine and the feminine ray. Going back to Saturn real quick, you could work with colors blue, purple, and black. Those are all Saturn colors. Um, and it's also like a time to maybe reestablish boundaries when we're working with Saturn retrograde. So, going back to Mercury retrograde. So those are just like really easy things that you can do. Be gentle with yourself. Know that we're all going through this and we're not perfect, but this is also lessons. And just know, like, okay, if you feel like you need to make a choice or you have all the information you have. And so, like, I've taken jobs during Mercury retrograde, and then I used to say that I regretted them, but honestly, I wouldn't be talking to you right now in this moment like this if I hadn't taken those jobs and learned those lessons and gone through that karma. So, um, just know that we have choices and we can make changes. And sometimes we only can use the information that we have in this moment. And then from there, once we get new information, we can always make choices and change our minds. So just wanted to leave you with that on Mercury retrograde. And then just a few days ago, actually, honestly, we're still feeling the energies. Some people would say we're feeling the energies until the 24th. Um, so we had the Mars K2 or Mars south node of the moon exact to the degree conjunction, and we're now like within a 2 degree. It just means like it's still pretty next to each other. So we're still feeling those planetary influences. Like when they're together, it's like they're meshing. So think about it like the color red and blue coming together and make purple. I mean, in this sense, we would say it's like the color Mars is represented by the color red. And K2 is represented by the color gray. So them coming together and making a color. Or you could look at it because Mars and we say a lot of times that K2 mirrors and acts a lot like Mars are both fire energy. You could look at fire on top of fire. And sidereally, this is happening in Leo. So we're really feeling this fiery energy. That's why I've been telling a lot of people, I'm like, drink cooling foods, eat cooling foods like cucumber, cumin, coriander, fennel. Coconut water, mint, chia seeds, like all those things are going to be cooling, right? It's going to help um, with the energies. This is fiery energy. And I would also say, I've been telling people to stay away from the color red because during this time, because we have Mars, which can be passionate and that fire and that courage. It's also muscles, but it's like the soldier, right? The warrior of the zodiac. And then it's with K2, which again, like similar energies. So it can bring some explosive energy, right? And we're feeling that. It's been like a very, it's funny because it's been like, oh, the weather hasn't been that bad. And then all of a sudden, around this conjunction, it got kind of fiery, right? It got hot all of a sudden. And we're in summer. So it's like fire on top of fire on top of fire. And so, how do we start healing that? How do we start healing the inflammation? We bring in cooling energy. So that's what's going on during this like July 20th, but all the way up until the 22nd. And if you want to pull in through the 24th, like just through the whole week if you really want to. So again, if there's certain people that you know can activate you that maybe and activate you in a way that's fiery, maybe you want to stay away from that. And this is also a time of like deep karma. Um, and then we'll actually get Mars moving out of the sign of Leo sidereally into Virgo at the end of the month of the 28th. And so we may start noticing that there were like breaks and cuts in certain areas of your life or just certain things that you had been encountering. And maybe you feel like, oh, well, like that energy is moving all of a sudden because K2 can bring cuts. Um, and that is one of like the significators for K2. But again, all of this is for our highest good. So maybe like there was an explosive moment in your life from this conjunction, but it was because um, it was bringing something to the surface that had been buried deep. And so if you hadn't gone through that, you maybe wouldn't have realized that you need to make some changes or some adjustments, especially because we are in this retrograde season. And then the last thing for the month is that we have the new moon on July 24th, and this is happening in Pushya, Nakshatra. So this nakshatra in Cancer, sidereally, is all about nourishment and resources and feeling nourished. And if we aren't feeling nourished, what can we do to make ourselves, or how can we start feeling nourished? So really potent, powerful nakshatra is ruled by Saturn, who's retrograde, right? So getting more energy of Saturn. And with this full moon, or sorry, with this new moon, we're also getting some of the energetics of Mercury retrograde because Mercury is very close to where this new moon is happening. But let's back up a little bit. So we have this new moon in Cancer, and new moons are all about new beginnings. So it's a great time to think about, okay, where do I need to move forward, or how do I want to move forward, or what is getting in the way of moving forward? So a beautiful time. I would say um, you only have about two more times to, if you want to do ritual work around the new moon, because so we have a new moon in August, and then the following new moon in September is an eclipse. Energy is a solar eclipse, so you're not going to want to really do any ritual work. It's too chaotic. The veil is really thin. So this is a good time to do that. And I would say, just as a reminder for people, you typically so on the new moon, right before the new moon, we get the dark moon, which is a really reflective time. So if you thought we were already reflective with four planets retrograde, watch out. So, but it's kind of preparing you for how you want to set forward. So then we get the new moon, and we kind of leave behind this moment of the dark moon. But in the mythology, on a new moon, you can't see the moon at all in the sky. And so you could start thinking about how you want to do ritual work, but I recommend that if you're really going to work with the energies and the energetics of the new moon, that you wait until there is a sliver of moonlight in the sky. And that's just going to help bring in more. Like, so for example, this is all about resources. And where maybe do you need more resources, or maybe where do you want to make more adjustments to your resources, right? In this area of this nakshatra of Pushya that is associated with Saturn, but also associated with the symbol is a cow's udder. And in Vedic astrology and in India, the cow is really revered and giving so many and honored, right? And giving so many resources and bringing out milk that is nourishing. So this is a very nurturing and nourishing. I mean, especially because it is in the sign of nourishment, which is Cancer. So you could look at it in that way. So I hope that this was helpful for you and gave you a little bit more understanding, like I guess in retrospect for some of this when I'm getting this out, but helpful for how you can look back at this month of July and also how you want to move forward with this retrograde energy and really how to work with this. So I wish you well, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video or in session.